Welcome to the Vegan Family Kitchen podcast. My name is Brigitte Chem and I am joined today by Nic Bathurst from Australia. Hi, Nic. Good to see you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you today. You are a dietitian and nutritionist, and you have been so for over 30 years. And since you yourself had breast cancer in 2013, you became a passionate advocate for plants. You've discovered the health and the weight loss benefits of a diet that is powered by plants. And so now today you specialize in helping women navigate the midlife situation of hormones, and you help them also release unwanted weight and optimize their health by eating more plants. It's a pleasure to have you today. Thank you for being here.
You're so welcome, Bridget.
So tell me a little bit about your story. I'm curious to know about your journey, how you came from your, I would say, probably traditional nutrition training to the plant-based side of the force.
I know. I was definitely a food pyramid, healthy eating advocate, and then when I got breast cancer, I basically went back and did some more research, and really driven from that place of I thought I was really healthy. How can I avoid getting cancer again? And I think that my, research led me down paths that I had never looked at before. Coming from that, from the institution of, dietetics and nutrition, you are not really taught that there's another way to eat other than what the industry-driven, meat and livestock corporation, the dairy corporations who fund these institutions. I discovered that as well. And so, it was just a whole new world. And I just think I just get so excited about it because I think especially in the last 10 years since we've discovered, about our healthy microbiome, we need to be eating more plants. That's the bottom line. You don't have to become a vegan, but you definitely need to be eating more plants. And, as you and I both know, it's so much more economical as well. People say, oh, it's expensive to eat, healthy. And I'm thinking, no, it's not. Get Bridget's book and find out how it's not.
You're so sweet. Thank you so much. Tell me a little bit more about what your life in terms of, health and fitness was like and how the breast cancer diagnosis came to you.
So, I had a pain. So I was very healthy, fit and healthy. I was raising 4 children. I was home educating them. And I had always, in my busyness of life, made my health a priority. So, if that meant getting up super early, made time to exercise. This is why I could have written your book, Bridget, because I seriously, every single sentence in this book, because I was managing a home of 6 people, home educating children. And because my health was such a priority and creating these beautiful, healthy meals for my family, I created a meal plan. And it's what I help my clients do. So it was a 3-week cyclic plan. And I did week 1, week 2, week 3, go back to week 1. And there was, I know yours is slightly different, but I know we're on the same page with that. And it was sort of had seasonal variations. And of course, some things would drop off as the kids got older and the kids started to get involved and do Thursday nights and things like that. But it was such a priority. And it just meant that, while I ate close to what the family ate, I wasn't a plant-based back then, but I would have like a smaller portion of meat and more vegetables, or I would have my spaghetti bolognese on, more vegetables rather than the pasta. So even though I was cooking for a family of meat eaters, I was still able to maintain my weight and my nutrition by just adjusting, the portions. And yeah, I think that my life changed a lot after I got breast cancer. About 18 months later, I actually, a very long story, but I woke up to the fact that I was in a very toxic relationship. My children were older by that stage. I actually had to leave my marriage. And so my journey around food is that I started to read all this information about plant-based, but I was so entrenched in the fact that we need fish and eggs and meat for protein. They were the last things to go. You know, over the years, as I learned more and more, I realized, oh my gosh, I don't need that wild caught salmon. In fact, my health is going to benefit if I'm not eating that. It actually doesn't matter anymore. So yeah, it was a journey of years, really.
You know, a lot of women get breast cancer, unfortunately. Many of them do some kind of research, but I don't think, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think the majority go fully plant based or anywhere near after their diagnosis. And that's something that I struggle with a bit. My husband is a breast cancer pathologist, so we talk about this a lot. And what do you think enabled you and maybe enables some other people like you to see the light, for lack of a better word, right? Like to make that transition as opposed to all the people that just stay stuck in their habits.
Yeah, and I think that if you're really healthy and you don't have any contraindications, then, you know, perhaps you can follow a diet similar to the Blue Zone study. You know, so you are having some, you know, some meat, you know, and fish and eggs in good quality as a condiment rather than the main source of your meals. But I can wholeheartedly say that if you have had a cancer diagnosis, the best way to prevent another diagnosis is to cut out all of the animal products, because we know that animal products and dairy contain estrogen, contain so many toxins and you know, compounds that are not going to be helpful to your health. And yeah, what else can you say? Really, I mean, go and read the China study. That did it for me. The fact that, you know, dairy products contain a protein called casein, and casein switches on tumor growth. Why would you want to touch dairy?
And I think we've been obsessed as a species, perhaps, in the last few hundreds of years, even thousands of years, with, having children that grow big and strong. And to a point, that might have been an evolutionary advantage for a while. But clearly, I mean, what has made us so big and so strong and so tall and so big in some cases might not actually be good past a certain point. And all all that protein and those hormones that are naturally present in the milk, for example, don't appear to have served us. Is that something you'd agree with?
Absolutely. We're protein obsessed. No other word about it. And I just say, you know, too much protein is as damaging as too little. And there is more and more research coming out all the time saying that excess protein, you know, is damaging to our health. And, you know, people say, well, where do you get your protein? And you and I know that there's an abundance of protein. I mean, beans and lentils are half protein, for goodness sake. But even things like oats, you know, our whole grains have protein in them. You know, you are, as one of the greats, you know, plant, I can't remember who says this, it's like if you're eating enough calories, you're eating enough protein. And one of the worst things is these protein supplements that people think they need to be putting in shakes and things like that. We don't even know if your body recognizes those highly processed shakes, you know, the protein in that even recognizes it as protein. So, yeah, we do not need excess protein.
The one thing I find puzzling, though, is that cancer patients in particular get told they need extra protein. I don't know if that's the case in Australia, but it's certainly the case here. How do you reconcile all of that together?
Oh, look, that is just such a rabbit warren. I don't even know whether we want to go down there, because they also encourage them to just eat whatever they want. Oh, just don't lose any weight. So just eat ice cream and chocolate and keep your calories up. There is no focus on health in those industries.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. You just said it. I've seen that before in the literature about why hospitals are not going more, plant-based and serving more healthy food. And part of the reasoning was like, well, we don't want people to lose weight. And I mean, we know that people may not be adapted yet to eating healthier meals. So much food waste. And so we're just going to keep on serving them the same crap. And I'm like, where do we start addressing this? This is maddening.
Yeah, I agree. It's, we're a sickness industry rather than a wellness industry.
Yeah, the sick care. It's not healthcare, it's sick care. So, what happened then? Well, first of all, you did not succumb to breast cancer. You're still with us here. So, that's something I celebrate. And you continued practicing as a dietitian after that. So, how did you change your practice after your own personal breast cancer diagnosis and your plant-based revelation?
I think it's just always when you're working with a client, my philosophy is we start where they're at right now. So, rather than reinvent the wheel, I don't give out, prescriptive cookie cutter diets. It's starting where they're at now and also educating. So wherever possible, I would start explaining why they might benefit from moving away from dairy and encourage them, say, to do an experiment. And I love experiments because I find that, when we tell ourselves we're only going to do this for a month, we can manage that. And then at the end of the month, when you've realized that, oh, actually, it was the dairy that was causing all of these symptoms, then that gives you the impetus to keep going. And, the other thing I would do is always encourage them to say, look, you make a spaghetti bolognese every week, let's add a can of lentils to that. Let's add a can of chickpeas to the curry. And when people realise that it's still the same flavours, but we're just adding in some beans, and sometimes they transition to the point where they're not adding the meat anymore. So they're still having, those products. And, if they're on a weight loss journey, then we can still have the flavours of these meals, but we cut back on the liquid fat and the high fat foods so that they can transition to, releasing weight. So it's just a gentle progression, and it really depends on the particular client and their, nutrition status and their health goals.
Tell me a little bit more about how people come to work with you, what brings them to work with you, and what kind of, transformation they wish to achieve in terms of their health or their fitness or whatnot.
Yeah, I specifically work, with women approaching midlife, because I feel like it is I'm there myself, and I've managed to navigate really well. And I feel like it's so confusing. There's such a lot of confusion around, menopause and what we're going through. And I feel like it's also a time in women's life where, things at their environment, their family life is changing. It's often when the kids have left home, so they're empty nesters. They've got that time to refocus on themselves again. And so, there is this increased awareness of, I need to spend some time on me now. I'm starting to see these changes. Their body shape can be changing. Women who've never struggled with weight before can suddenly find that, they've got a muffin top, even though they haven't changed their diet. And, this is because of hormones. Our hormones are changing. And as you know, our estrogen drops away, our body actually stops storing fat on, say, the thighs and the hips, and now it wants to store it around our middle. So, there are very good reasons why your shape is changing, why you're struggling with weight. And there is just so much you can do. And I just get so excited because we don't have to be a victim of our hormones. And, when we embrace the power of plants, eating more plants, I find that, women are just so excited because they can, lose those extra few kilos that they've gained. Their hot flushes, start to get better. They start to sleep better. There is just so much power in eating more plants.
Is it just that? Just eating more plants? Is it so easy?
It is easy in theory, but as you and I know, we are entrenched in our habits, and it is never super easy to make lifestyle changes. So when I say easy, I'm acknowledging that there is some work on, the individual person to make. Because, sometimes there's things like alcohol that have become a habit. And, alcohol is one of those things that there are no redeeming features of alcohol. And I did drink alcohol before I got breast cancer. So, and then once I did get breast cancer, I had to stop ignoring the research. And there is so much research linking alcohol and breast cancer, pretty much so that the link between alcohol and breast cancer is as strong as the link between smoking and lung cancer. So alcohol is not your best friend. And I think this is really important to understand because, once you start drinking alcohol, your liver stops breaking down estrogen. It stops breaking down cholesterol, a lot of things. And so, and what happens is that there's any half-processed estrogen in your liver, it dumps it back into your bloodstream saying, I'll deal with it later because I've got to deal with this alcohol. And it's that half-processed estrogen that is associated with our female cancers. So alcohol is huge, and a lot of women find themselves in midlife in a place where they are drinking more and, out of habit, really.
There's been a big conversation in Canada these last few weeks because the new national guidelines have come out, and now basically they're timidly but surely embracing this idea that, maybe alcohol is never really a good thing. And there's such strong resistance. And as I was listening to you, I was thinking of how over the last, let's say, 50 years, drinking has become acceptable for women, which was kind of a feminist victory. We can smoke, we can drink, we can do everything the boys do. And I think women have possibly been a little faster to get off the smoking bandwagon. I'm not sure about the data there, but the drinking has become such a social meme almost. The wine Wednesday, and mommy's glass of wine. And I mean, there's so many popular culture products that, or if you just go to like a shop and they have all of these funny, I'm using air quotes here, funny products that feature this idea of associating motherhood with wine and drinking, less so beer, but it felt like, I don't want to say a victory, but it did feel liberating. But maybe it was a bit of a hoax after all. I think women might have been conned into embracing alcohol. And obviously it was also good just for the same thing as the cigarette companies, but it just increased their sales to be able to create products that women liked. And it turns out maybe it wasn't that great for us.
And I just recalled the Huberman podcast. I can't remember his name. He's an incredible researcher, and he does a lot of studies. And he was studying alcohol and basically saying that even having like one glass of wine a night or 4 or 5 on the weekend. It didn't matter how you drank alcohol, you had an increased level of anxiety every single day. And here we are thinking that alcohol relaxes us, when in actual fact, it is doing the opposite. And it is damaging your liver. It is, for women, it is affecting your hormones. It doesn't matter how old you are, it is affecting your hormones. As soon as you drink alcohol, your estrogen levels rise. It doesn't matter how old you are. So I think that, it is definitely worth the experiment. And that's where I started. I did the Feb fast, the dry July, the October, and always realized that I felt better. I slept better. I didn't have, the hunger that you wake up with. And so I always encourage clients to do those experiments, but I also heavily educate, because I think that when women hear what we've just talked about, they're a little bit surprised at how damaging alcohol is to us women specifically, and increasing our cancer risk. And I am excited because there is a lot more sober movements on the rise, and women talking about the fact how good their life is now that they're not drinking alcohol. And we're not talking, what we would define as an alcoholic. We are talking women who were just casually having a couple of glasses every night.
I have a friend who is a cardiologist, and he would always joke, what is the definition of an alcoholic? And the answer is someone who drinks more than their doctor. And in the medical profession, I think in any profession when there's people earning more, there's also been a drift towards drinking more alcohol, more, sophisticated alcohols. And it seemed like the fashionable and well-meaning thing to do. I think there's also so much literature around studies even that are, I think, confusing to some extent about the so-called benefits of red wine. But listen, if the only kind of fruit that people consume is, some grapes through their wine, well, of course, people that have some kind of fruit are better off than the people that don't have any fruit whatsoever. But you could have a cup of blueberries instead of a glass of wine and be better off. But do you see that resistance? Do you see confusion in your patients and your clients, sorry, there? And how, if at all, does it get overcome?
Yeah, it's very tricky, because this is something that I can only educate on, encourage them to have, a month alcohol free, experience that for themselves, and then really the ball's in their court.
Let's give it a try.
What was that? Sorry?
I said, let's just give it a try. As you say, I think the 1 month experiment is a great way to do it. And then also, by the way, you're going to save a lot of money.
Absolutely.
If nothing else.
Yeah, exactly. It is always worth the experiment, whether it's, moving away from dairy for a month, whether it's even coffee. Now, I know that, this too will, have women shrieking in the background going, no, don't make me give up my coffee. But, coffee, for some women, when they give up coffee, they just cannot believe how much better they sleep. And this might only be one coffee a day.
So true. I did write an article that's on my blog somewhere. If you go to veganfamilykitchen.com/blog about how I came to the decision of foregoing coffee, which was a big deal for me because, I was one of the first French language bloggers in the world, and my blog was all about coffee, and that was in the mid-90s. And it was a really big deal for me when I decided, and I wasn't even drinking a lot of it, but I was probably having a double espresso every morning and some other form of coffee sometimes. And I gotta say, it was the worst month of my life in many ways. But the major transformation I experienced after, and again, I'm not denying that there's not some health benefits to coffee drinking. And again, it's a fruit. So yeah, there's going to be benefits. So, but clearly there's also, for some people at least, a downside, and it's worth having it as an experiment. And I thought for me it would be a temporary thing, by the way. And after my daughter was born, it was like about 5 months after she was born, and it was my first outing, without my child, and I was breastfeeding, so it was like, an hour and a half where I can step out of the house. It was on Mother's Day, and I went to one of my favorite coffee shops, and I was like, I'll have an espresso and I will savor it. It will be so good. And I got so high, I thought I would not be able to walk home or bike home. I was jittery. I was like, holy goodness, what happened to me? It was so potent. And I think there's different ways of metabolizing caffeine. Some people are fast or slow metabolizers. And I was clearly of the kind that had this serious struggles with the metabolizing of caffeine. So I'm not missing it at all. I want to say, I would like to hear your thoughts about this, because I was reading, I really love the parenting section in the New York Times. Jessica Groves sends a weekly newsletter, and it is very often full of wisdom, but there was something that disturbed me a little bit last week, and you reminded me of that when you said, when you mentioned, oh, don't take away my wine, don't take away my coffee, what is it going to be next? And she was, so in the parenting newsletter, there was this mention about the importance of pleasure. And yeah, there's things that are not like super healthy, but if they bring you pleasure, pleasure is important in life and things like that. And my reflection, and it was like, well, yeah, there might be a health cost, but yeah, what's it, maybe you have one less year of life, statistically speaking, but what's the big deal? And my response was a fuzzy one, because it made me feel very uncomfortable. But also I was thinking, well, number one, that pleasure can be replaced with a different pleasure that we just don't know about yet. Maybe, for example, there's lots of non-alcoholic beverages that are coming on the line that are super interesting, but also it's not just 1 year of life. Sometimes, people may statistically just die a year sooner or a few months sooner, but it's the misery of having your life dominated by chronic disease like diabetes or heart disease, having, I don't know, a stroke, living with the consequences of cancer, which can suck big time. So that is not pleasurable. And I don't know how to bring this conversation up in a way that doesn't make me sound like I'm trying to kill the spirit of the party. It's not that I'm against pleasure, but can we find different ways to have fun? How do you feel about that?
Look, I feel like it's very individual, and unless you've done the experiments, you don't really know that there's another side. And I think that, like, for me, that first year of not drinking alcohol was revolutionary. The first time I went out with my girlfriends, and we used to stay at each other's houses so that we could drink and not have to drive. And I just thought, what am I going to do? And so I made a deal with myself, and I said, okay, I was 6 weeks into being not drinking. They didn't know. And I said, okay, the first drink has to be non-alcoholic. And then if you think you're going to die, you can have an alcoholic drink. And I got to the end of that first drink, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I can do this. And as the night progressed and they sort of, became more imbibed with alcohol, I'm like, I'm present. I'm like to the conversations. In my head, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to wake up feeling amazing. This is great. I didn't feel like I'd missed out on anything at all. And then about a couple of months later, I went to a big function, presentations, and then when all the presentations were over, the lights went out, band came on, and everyone got up and danced. And I'd actually never danced sober. I was 50 the year that I gave up alcohol. And I just thought, well, you either sit here, girlfriend, like an old maid, or you get out there and you enjoy yourself. Got up onto the dance floor and realised no one cared. I had a ball. And it's just, experiencing that for yourself. Do you know what I mean? And I think coffee's the same. Don't hear us saying that you have to give up these substances without, experimenting, educating. For some people, 1 cup of coffee is fine. But I found that when I gave up that 1 cup of coffee, not only did I fall asleep quicker, and I'm a good sleeper, but also I wasn't getting the lunchtime natter nap slump. And I'm like, I didn't realize this was associated with that 1 coffee a day. So unless you do those experiments, you're never going to discover that there is another side, and that actual fact, you may feel even better than you do now.
I need to ask you to share something. You mentioned in our conversation before we started recording that there's different types of personalities when it comes to certain things. And you were mentioning the moderators and the abstainers. Can you say a little bit more about that and what it means when it comes to making dietary and lifestyle choices?
I love this. Thank you for asking this question, because we can get really hung up on the fact that, we're weak-willed or we have no self-control. And I think this is especially so for women, because we're emotional, tend to be more emotional eaters than men. And, and we often struggle with our weight. And so we can think that, I just don't have any self-control. I'm just weak-willed. And a couple of years ago, for the life of me, I cannot remember who coined this. It's quite famous. She talked about you're either an abstainer or a moderator. And what this means is that for someone like me, I am not a moderator when it comes to chocolate. So I have to abstain. And what that means is I can't have 1 piece of chocolate and not want to eat more. I want to keep eating, the whole block. And so I don't have chocolate in the house. Whereas something like potato chips don't even do anything for me. I wouldn't even open the packet. And I could have 1 and then go, oh yeah, that's enough. So I believe it's about understanding yourself and not feeling guilty because you can't have chocolate in the house. It's totally okay. Because the other thing that's really important to understand is that these things like chocolate and these foods that we just find irresistible, the food manufacturers have spent millions of dollars creating that perfect blend of fat, sugar, and salt to create this bliss point that just makes it absolutely irresistible for us. And we just want to keep on eating more. I mean, this is the secret of takeaway food. It just tastes so delicious and we just want to keep on going back for more and more. So, please don't think that you're weak-willed or have self-discipline. We're a product of our modern world. And so that what it is, it's about setting yourself up for success. I don't have chocolate in the house, but I enjoy it if I go somewhere and I get offered some, or I go on holidays and I buy myself some of my organic, vegan dark chocolate and I enjoy it. But I think it's really important to understand that.
You bring me to this question when you're talking about takeaway. What then can we do? And I know you and I are golden appreciators of good practices such as meal planning and meal prep. What place do those practices take in your work with your clients? Do you think those are useful practices, and how do you do them, maybe even for yourself?
I think that meal planning and prepping is non-negotiable if you want to be healthy. And there's just no way around it. What else could I say? unless you have the funds, the finances to have a personal chef, or you're able to access quality foods that you can purchase, which is rare. I think learning how to meal prep and plan yourself is essential. And, like you heard at the beginning of our discussion, when I was cooking for a family, I had a 3-week cyclic menu. I find now that I'm on my own, I tend to cook I batch cook 3 things a week. So on the weekend, I'll batch cook 2, and then midweek, I'll batch cook another one, which is a big pot of something. And then I just rotate that around. And I have about 3 or 4 weeks of recipes that I tend to rotate. And then, there's the emergency things. Like we can always fall back on a roast potato and baked beans, for example. And, before I can hear, people listening to get, oh, but baked beans are full of sugar. Seriously, I loved the I Quit Sugar movement, but it made people afraid of fruit and simple things like baked beans. Please don't worry about the little bit of sugar in the baked beans. Embrace the fact that you are having, some quality beans there. And so
once in a while.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. And but it's better than takeaway. Even having baked beans on toast is so much better than eating takeaway.
I was just looking at this study in some journal of behavior and food or something like that about how people choose at home versus at restaurants. And of course, the choices we make at restaurants are less inspired by health and this and that. And that hit home for me because once a year, I gather, I will say, the courage to make cookies, like the kind of cookies with like icing, Christmas cookies. And every year, not every single year, but I used to always wreck them because I could not bring myself to put as much sugar and fat, in the cookie as you need to put in to make it a proper cookie, right? I was always trying to substitute things and change the recipe. And I would not ask myself those questions if I had a cookie at the coffee shop. But as you say, you ask yourself about the baked beans because you're at home, but if it comes from outside, oh, well, you just eat it. And I can tell you that if you're ordering noodles from a restaurant, like a pad thai, the sauce is ketchup. It has a lot of sugar in it.
Yep, so true.
Something to think about.
Absolutely.
I have 2 more questions for you. One of them is, I think, reflecting on the fact that a lot of women are in relationship with people who may or may not be interested in changing their own diets for better or for worse. And I feel with certainly my clients that a substantial amount of resistance comes from, yes, but my husband, yes, but my children, yes, but this other person that I cook for. How do you advise your clients around the issue of relationship and different choices?
That's a huge issue with many of my clients. Their partners are not even interested in the slightest. And I always come back to the only person you can change is yourself. And so I really work closely with my clients for setting themselves up for success. And like, I mentioned earlier in that, we can just cook meals that will satisfy my client, excuse me, and bring and cook their partners a piece of meat on the side. Or we can make, their spaghetti bolognese. If you're making a spaghetti bolognese, put 2 saucepans on the stove and cook the same ingredients, but just put mince in his and put, lentils in yours if you want to take it that far. So there are always ways. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I work really closely with clients navigating that. And it can also, come down to the point of asking the clients the partners to please not have their sweet treats. If you can't moderate those things, and please put them in a fridge in the shed or something so they're out of sight. But it is really working with that whole, with that individual and setting themselves up for success.
So what advice is the number one tip or trick or suggestion you would make to women in midlife who feel like they need to feel more in charge of their health and feel better for themselves, whether or not they've had a catastrophic diagnosis like you did? But what would you like to tell them to help them get on top of their health?
Buy your book.
Oh, you are so sweet. Thank you.
Seriously, I mean, because that's at the core. And I think it can be just so overwhelming. And your book really, just shows, it talks you through how to make this easy. And making it easy in the kitchen is half of the battle. And I think, on a serious note, I do think that you should read this book, but I think education is key as well. I think that we really need more education, because when women understand that connection between their health and what they are eating, it can be a game changer for them. And I don't know why, but we have this disconnect between our health and what we're eating. It's almost like, it doesn't matter what I eat. Oh, I've got, heart disease. I've got cancer. I've got diabetes. It's not actually common knowledge in our, medical world that there's a connection with what you eat. And yet we can reverse nearly all of our lifestyle diseases by the power of the fork. So it's liberating, it's exciting, and, it's empowering when you understand that connection and you start to make those baby steps, those, steps for yourself in the direction of, feeding your body good food.
I love it, and I hope others will want to connect with you to dive into your wealth of experience and knowledge. So if people want to get a hold of you, what is the best way to do it?
I'm all over the place. So my handle is Naturally Nic. I have a website, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and also I have a huge YouTube channel where I have cooking demonstrations and recipes, and I do product reviews. I've got over 60 product reviews now. Clients love them. And and reach out on all of those channels. There's ways to get in touch with me. I have a mini menopause assessment, which is a free 30-minute complimentary consult with me, where I take a peek at your diet and lifestyle, and I'm just able to pinpoint, a couple of things that you can start implementing right away to move the needle in the right direction of your health goals. And then if you want my support, we can talk about that.
That's beautiful, and all that will be in the show notes at the bottom so people can get a hold of you. I think naturallynic.com.au, but don't worry, it will be in the notes so you can just click it. Thank you so much for being here today. It was a pleasure to get to know you and to have this conversation, and I so wish we could get together in person to cook together. I think we would have a blast to have a cooking club meeting in person. Should we at least be less than like 14 time zones away? So we'll work on that. I look forward to connecting more and continuing this conversation. Thank you so much for being here today.
So welcome, Bridget. It was a great conversation.